In this short training video, I'm going to show you how to use basic shapes and the Shapebuilder tool to recreate some of the images in this scientific diagram. I've got two images, a square peg and a round peg. In order to use the Shapebuilder tool, I first need to create the separate basic shapes that I'm going to overlap and then use the Shapebuilder tool to build the final image. So I'm going to start with the square peg image, and so I've already got my squares drawn out. I'm going to select each one of these squares, and then using the Align panel, I'm going to horizontally and vertically align the centers of these squares. I'm going to move this up a little bit, and now I'm going to drag the very thin rectangle over the middle of my stack squares. I'm going to use this thin rectangle to basically punch a hole through the center of my squares. Then I'm going to move this bigger blue rectangle or wider blue rectangle over the center of my narrow rectangle, and that's going to become the bottom peg. So now I'm going to zoom in to these stacked shapes and select all of them with my black selection tool, and then I'm going to get my Shapebuilder tool from my tool stack. So the Shapebuilder tool is automatically set to add. If I hold down the Alt or Option key on a Mac, I can set the tool to subtract. So the first thing that I'm going to do is subtract some of the shapes that are overlapping. To do so, I can click individually on the shapes, or I can drag through shapes that I no longer wish to see. Okay, then by letting go of my Alt or Option key, the tool is set back to Add, and with the Add position, I'm going to reunite some of the cut up shapes. And now I'm left with a square peg. I'm going to move over to the right hand side of my screen and basically do the same thing that I did on the left, only using the round shapes. So I've selected all of my circles. I'm going to align horizontally and vertically these circles. I'm going to move them up a little bit, take my thin rectangle and lay that in the center across my my circles. I'm going to take my thicker blue rectangle, and I'm not going to put it at the bottom of the circles. I'm going to edge it up just a little bit into my bottom circle, because I want a smooth corner when I finally get my shapes all cut apart. So now I'm going to select all of these shapes and grab my Shapebuilder tool again, hold my Alt or Option key down, and get rid of the pieces I don't want. And then letting go of the Alt or Option key, I'm going to unite the pieces that I need to pull back together. So now I've got a round peg that I can select and move over and make sure it's the same height as my square peg. I see that my square peg has slightly longer legs than my round peg. So what I'm going to do about that is to take my direct selection tool, which is my white arrow, and marquee around the bottom points of the paths on my square peg, and then just nudge my square peg legs up a little bit. So now that I've got these two shapes created, I need to make sure that they're the right color. I see that I started out with a brown square peg, so I'm taking my black selection tool and selecting my square peg shape and coming over to my swatches panel and selecting a brown for that shape. And because I want to save this peg, this square peg, as a symbol to use later, and I have my symbols panel open on the right, I'm going to take this selected shape and just drop it into my symbols panel, where I will rename it Square Brown Peg. And it doesn't matter what the export type is, whether it's a movie clip or a graphic, but I'm going to change that to graphic. And now I've got my brown square shape peg in my symbols library, and I'm going to select my round peg, change it to a dark green color, drag that into my symbols panel, rename this round green peg, and put the export type as a graphic, and then select OK. So now I've got a square peg and a round peg, and I've got the symbols in my symbol panel. I can drag these symbols out and reuse them, and if I needed to make any changes to the symbols that I've already pulled out onto my diagram, then all I would have to do is come back into my symbols panel, select the symbol, and let's move this over so it can be seen. Say I possibly wanted to lengthen these legs a little bit. Let's do this dramatically so you can see that I actually did something. And then at the top left hand corner of your screen, I'm going back through this isolation mode breadcrumb trail, and now you can see that all of my green round peg shapes have much longer legs. And that is the beauty of drawing something and then saving your drawing as a symbol if you are going to either need to be able to reuse it later, or that symbol might change. So that's how to create images using basic shapes and the Shapebuilder tool, and then saving those images as reusable symbols.